Hi, I've got a lot of material to go through, so I'll go through fast. My name is Adam Rawnsley. I report for Rolling Stone. And I'm here to talk to you today about the company powering Russia's drone war in Ukraine, and how we can learn a little bit more about it and Russia's drone war in general. So as I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, in fall of 2022, we saw something a little bit strange, which was Russia using Iranian drones to attack Ukraine, which, if you're someone like me who's followed this, it's a little bit strange because Russia makes ballistic missiles, makes cruise missiles, makes fighter jets. Why is Russia relying on a country like Iran to fill up its stocks of precision-guided munitions? Well, a good way to answer that, and a number of other questions like who's making these and what does this tell us, is to start with hacked data. As it happens, I got a little bit in 2021. So for a little bit of context, since about 2014, I'd been following Iran's drone industry because I'm like that. In particular, I've been following a company called Mado, which struck me as very interesting. It marketed military caliber drone engines. And the worst thing that could happen happened in 2021, which was that the United States Treasury scooped me and sanctioned them before I could publish my research. In fairness to them, I waited 7 years to publish it, so that's a little bit much procrastination. But what happened was, the sanctions designation came out, and I said, oh, all right, why don't we just do a little Twitter thread and do a mini notebook dump about what we've learned about Mado. So I did my thread. It did okay. And about a month later, something strange happened, which was somebody popped into my Twitter DMs and said, hey, you know that company that just got hacked, Mado, and its CEO, or excuse me, you know that company Mado that just got sanctioned and its CEO Yusuf Abu Talebi? We hacked him too, and we have a bunch of their stuff. And so they pointed me to essentially two sets of data. And that data was stuff that had been leaked in August of 2020 by a group calling itself Hack, and it's a series of documents dumped online. Nobody paid attention to it because before the war in Ukraine, this stuff was pretty esoteric. Even I and the four other people who were Mado heads didn't really follow it that much. And so they pointed me to that and implied that they were affiliated with those folks. And they also gave me a second set of data, which is a series of videos. As you can see there, that is a screenshot of Hack pretending, or not pretending, but at least claiming to hack into Mado to get these documents. And the technical data that was offered and delivered, it's equivocal. It's interesting if true, but it's nothing we could go on. So how can we actually go about verifying this stuff? It purports to answer the question of who's making the engines for these drones that Iran is using and that Russia is using now pretty easily in this one particular contract from about 2015 that shows that these engines are about $7,200 a piece, and this is a contract allegedly between Mado and the IRGC Aerospace Force, which is the drone and missile arm of the IRGC. And that's an inventory of delivery for some of the engines along with the serial numbers. And these things look pretty cheap. They look kind of similar. Maybe this is the thing. Maybe this is true. Maybe this answers all of our questions. And it also looks a lot like that MD-550, what we had seen before the war in that top picture in like a little commercial that they were using for the Shahed 136, the drone they're using, that Russia's using in Ukraine. Certainly looks a lot like it, but I don't have to tell a room full of cyber people. The problem with using hack data is find the toenail. I look at every pile of hack data like a delicious cake in which there may be a toenail. This is all plausible, and it seems likely to me because the MD-550 engine in that contract certainly looks a lot like an engine that Mado has shown off. And also, that engine, if you went to Mado's old website, they copy and pasted the specs from the Limbach L550E, which is a real engine that looks exactly like it, and they kind of copied the designation too with the 550. So it seems fairly plausible, but again, I don't want to catch the toenail. So how can we go about verifying that and learn a little bit more about this war? One way to do that is through 3D modeling. As you can see here, that is a 2014 Aviation Expo picture in Iran. Very much thank you to Mado for showing off all of these pictures. That is the MD550. And what I did was I said, okay, so these things look similar. Why don't we 3D model using feedstock imagery of the MD550 in Mado's custody, shown off, published on the web, and make those models so that we can get that model and we can manipulate it and we can compare it to some of the wreckage that we've seen in Ukraine. And I turned to expert 3D modeler Nathan Hunt, who spends a lot of time modeling North Korean nuclear missiles, as one does. And this is the result. You can see some pieces are missing. On the picture on the left is some wreckage. On the picture of the right is sort of similarly angled MD550. Missing a few pieces, but it looks like we're on the right path. A little bit more wreckage here. And not only that, not only does it look like the engine that we've seen on the Shahed 136 wreckage in Ukraine, it also looks like other engines we've seen on other Iranian drones. This sad-looking gentleman here had crashed in Pakistan on the border with Iran in about 2019. That's the Ababil 3. Before the Shahed 1-3 became the new IT girl, Ababil 3 was the sort of workhorse reconnaissance drone of Iran. Using it in places like Syria, Iraq, etc. And so that's also a good fit right there. And so what we can surmise from this is that at least visually, these look very similar, and that it's at least plausible that an engine of that specification would be used not just on the Shahed 136, but across the fleet of Iranian drones. But the problem is, just because it looks the same doesn't necessarily mean it is the same. This is allegedly a knockoff of the Limbach L550E. How do we know it's just not another company knocking off? Well, let's go back to that contract we saw and see if we can verify a little bit. That contract, this is the translated version of it, has an index of serial numbers which were scheduled for delivery to the IRGC from Mado. And if we notice, there are two patterns in those serial numbers. There's a 9, they're both 8 digits. There's one that starts with a 9, and then there's the 100 series. So if we blow up some of these, again, thank you very much, Yusuf. If we blow up some of these images from the Expo in 2014, what we can see is that, there is a similar series of serial numbers that is evident in the imagery and in the contract. But so the problem with that is that, well, theoretically, anyone could have done what I did at the time. Zoomed up on that thing and said, there's a 9 series serial number, let's put that in our contract. So that's a little bit equivocal. Where it gets better is in the 1 series. So this contract is from about 2015, allegedly. And what you can see is the serial numbers scheduled for delivery go 100 or 1000, and then they go to 1001, 1002. And then now we go to Ukraine wreckage, and we can see 1003. Now, why this matters is the chronology. Is because I'm one of 5 people who were into this stuff beforehand. We never got to see an MD550 serial number that was a 100 series in the wild. It just did not happen until the war in Ukraine. So that tells us something very important. Either the people who leaked this contract are really, really good at guessing, or they have access to some non-public information that people who are way too in the weeds on this don't. Doesn't necessarily mean that everything is true, but it gives us a little bit of an inkling that they're onto something. And so how else can we verify this? Like I said, the actual hack video they leaked and pretended that that was them doing it. There's not that much technical evidence in there. But maybe we can look at some of the atmospherics and see if they're at least plausible. And that's where we go to Crazy Yusuf's House of Cruise Missile Engines and Motorcycles. So if you go through those documents that AA Hack claimed to have leaked, you see domain madomotor.ir. And madomotor.ir is super interesting. It's a motorcycle company. And one factoid that you may not know, but which is super fun, is that a lot of drone engines are not terribly dissimilar from motorcycle engines, especially when you come to like rotary engines, some of which Mado offers for military use. And Mado Motor is owned by a guy named Mohammed Abu Talebi, which is kind of similar to Yusuf Abu Talebi. And this company was created in around like 2017, 2018, latter half of the 2020s. So it's at least theoretically plausible that they could have spun off a motorcycle company from their business in military drone engines. But can we verify that a little bit more? The implication here is that they found all this drone data in websites and databases run and owned by a motorcycle company. Is that true? Well, if we go to Mado's old website and we look at the website registration, we can find they're in a particular industrial park north of Qum. And just so happens that our buddy Yusuf Abu Talebi, circled in green over there, did a nice little grip and grin walkthrough with some ministers from the government about the fancy new motorcycle facility in the Shokoya Industrial Park. And if we take that little picture of him in that corner and run it through Amazon recognition with a picture that Yusuf did in a very friendly Iranian media piece, it tells us, yep, that's the same guy. And I can just tell you, I have spoken to Yusuf, and it is fair to say that he was not interested in contributing to my reporting process on this. How else can we verify that there may be a nexus between this motorcycle company and a drone and cruise missile engine company? This is screenshots from one of the videos that the hackers sent me, the stuff that is not public except for what I put up here. And that is a Teledyne cruise missile engine. It's used in target drones, the MQM-107, which we sent to Iran in the Shah days, and that they still use for their air defense force. And it's in this facility, and they said, hey, this is a video of this cruise missile engine that we hacked from Yusuf. Well, can we verify that? And what does it tell us? Well, if you're a Mado head like me, you collect Mado commercials. In particular, you collect commercials for their motorcycle company. And in one of their motorcycle commercials, they show off their production facility. And this is my first instance of indoor geolocation. And you can see it's got the same sort of, striping on the walls, the tiles. Also in other screenshots, you can see that they've got the companies walking around in the blue Mado company polo shirts. So that's super fun. That gives us at least an idea that it's true. The other fun part is the telling sock puppetry. I don't know if you know this, but your Google reviews are tied to your email address, and if you publish your email address in a registry of Iranian defense industry, I can find Yusuf saying, oh wow, this Mado company is great. I feel that it's German. Remember that the Limbach L550E is knocked off, or the MD550E is knocked off a German engine. So what does this tell us about Mado, and how did they get here? The interesting thing about them is that they came very far, very fast. And this is the first incident I can find of Yusuf and Mado. It's from 2008. It's a forum of him saying, hey, we're a propeller company. And we do drone propellers and aerospace propellers. And so if you look at the timeline of when they were growing up, they went from milling propellers to making drone engines to potentially making cruise missile engines pretty damn fast. And if there's any govies in here, alert your eyes. How did they do that? Well, the easiest way to do it is if you have an entire illicit import infrastructure backing you up. If you go through the WikiLeaks documents, you can see in a period of 2005 to 2008, Iran starts trying to import the Limbach L550E so that they can reverse engineer it. Just as it happens, at the same time, Mado websites like Madoprop, UAV.ir, Papad, which is the Persian word for UAV, start getting registered. And we also, in 2012, get a prosecution of 2 Iranian procurement agents for sending L550s to Iran. And along the way, Yusuf starts getting a lot of attention, and he starts getting a lot of, love. And this is him in Syria in 2009, bragging about how they've got all these engines that were previously available only for like the UK and Germany and that kind of stuff. And then, the Ayatollah loves all his Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps children, but he loves his Aerospace Force children especially. And in 2014, he goes to a Aerospace Force sort of petting zoo here, and you can see that that is the MD-550 in the far end of there. So it's a pretty big bet that when the supreme leader is high-fiving your products, you got to rise in profile. Not only that, that silver fox over there is Amir Ali Hajizadeh, who is the head of the Aerospace Force. He's the commander of their missile force. As you might imagine, missiles very important to Iran. Pretty senior guy. Around this time, he's going through bragging that, hey, we got these new drone engines as they start showing MD-550 and achievements videos in the background in the B-roll. And along the way, he also starts making enemies. In 2015-ish, another group calling itself Iranian Anonymous releases a list of people they say are involved in the Iranian drone industry, and Mado is on it, which is a little bit similar to my experience with some of these hackers. And there's some evidence that they might not just be doing drone engines. One of the videos they sent me was this, which shows a box of rotors and an employee complaining to Yusuf, hey, we got this shipment of 50 rotors, they're broken. Tolerance is all wrong. And if you know anything about Iranian drones, cruise missiles, one of the cruise missiles that is fairly recent, which they've sort of laid claim to in the past week as well, officially, is the Quds 1 and the Quds 2, which uses a TJ-100 turbojet engine. You may have seen its work in the Abqaiq attack in 2019 and a separate, more recent attack on UAE oil infrastructure. And it was illicitly imported through a bunch of like shady middlemen, whatever. And it's based on the Czech TJ-100, which you can see at the bottom there. And in some of the hacked documents from AA Hack, you can see that they are asking for reverse engineering and production of 50 of these things based on the TJ-100. And there's also a claim that they got some rotors from a Chinese company for that engine. Remember that box of rotors? Once again, we use our 3D modeling. Seems like a pretty good candidate. But one of the other things that sort of corroborates this is that they claim that they got this from China. Well, is there any sort of background to a Mado-China relationship? Well, it's amazing what you can do with a few bucks in the Hong Kong Business Registry. You can find Yusuf and his business partner creating two companies, Mado and Cato, in like 2012, I think is it? And then those companies are combined into a Chinese mainland company. And if you start scrolling around for the social footprints, you find a dude who's involved in Shanghai, China for Mado. Of course, Alibaba, that's usually a constant in a lot of this Iranian proliferation stuff. And if we dox Yusuf, we can find he and the missus were there in 2011. That's him and the missus standing in front of the rickshaw statue in Beijing. And the date on that is important to us because, okay, this is early 2010s, and it could have been, this is not related to the motorcycle company, which started much, much later. So what did we learn? We learned that, the Shahed drones that they're using have pretty cheap components. And that is sort of why, like we said, Russia is not an aerospace laggard. But it's pretty good at finding the gaps in its arsenal and filling them because, the MD-550 and the Shahed 136 are not marvels of science and technology, but they're good enough. And when you're in a war and you're short of precision-guided munitions, good enough beats perfect. And one of the other things we learned is that every Iranian drone is a piñata of export control failures. We learned that they've got a lot of very well-informed hacking brand personas who have spent years and years doxing these guys. And there's quite a few more fairly recently. And last bit, leaking is easy, verification is hard. My dog says hello.